If you're like me, you probably have a lot of SRE articles saved somewhere, like a pocket reader or as a folder in your Chrome browser. The hard part is actually getting through to these articles after you've bookmarked them. When was the last time you actually read one of these things from your folder? For me, it's not that often. So I decided that this is a good way for me to actually go through the articles if I can share them with other people. So you're listening right now to my review of a few articles that I think are useful for SREs as well as SRE managers and anyone really who is interested in increasing the reliability of their software. Let's get started. The first article is by Brodbeck of GitHub. His article is titled Managing Risk as an SRE. This article gives valuable insights into the role of SREs in identifying and managing risk, which I think is such an important aspect of being an SRE. You're essentially a risk manager at heart. You're trying to reduce the risks, and that's through things like error budgeting, etc. He even gives detailed tips on how to do this effectively. On top of this, the article goes into different strategies for managing risk, like reactive and proactive risk management. By using these strategies, a combination of these strategies, SREs can make sure their systems are more reliable and stable. One of the biggest takeaways I got from this article is how crucial it is to create a culture of risk management within the organization. It all sounds straightforward to say culture, but how would you actually tangibly achieve this? Well, you can achieve this through a few ways. You can achieve this by doing a few things like having open communication, making sure everyone feels like they own the work, and giving them ample chances to learn and grow. Here's a quote from the article that highlights how to develop a risk awareness mindset. Simply operating a service for a period of time or participating in an SLO workshop with another team who understands the service can teach a more junior engineer a lot about the service operation and the risks associated with it. Unpacking that, it's emphasizing the importance of going and running the service, actually having practical experience with it, or participating in a workshop that goes through the SLOs. One thing that GitHub specifically does is get SREs to do weekly presentations on risks that are spread throughout the organization, and they also create a risk register based on those presentations. Overall, this article gives an insightful guide to managing risk as an SRE. Whether you're new to the field or an experienced SRE, I believe this article is definitely worth a read. It's a great resource for anyone who wants to get better at identifying and managing risk in systems. The next article is by someone I've followed for a long time, Will Larson. He was the founder of SRE at Uber. His article, Who Runs Engineering Processes, caught my attention recently. So in this article, Will Larson is talking about how important it is to have someone who really owns and manages the engineering process in an organization. In this article, Will Larson is talking about how important it is to have someone who really owns and manages the engineering process in an organization. And not just anyone, but a champion who does three things in particular. 1, the authority to make critical decisions. 2, the skill to influence cross-functional teams. And 3, the ability to drive process improvements. So they need to be powerful enough to have decision-making rights. They need to be able to work with multiple teams, and they need to be able to improve the process and actually follow through on that. This fits in well with what I'd expect a senior SRE to be doing. They might not have enough authority on their own, but they can bring their director on their side to make all of this happen. Will also thinks that being transparent and communicating well is key. Here's a quote that reflects this. Transparency is essential for effective engineering process management. It helps everyone understand the process and why certain decisions are being made. That way, everyone is on the same page and understands what is going on. Will says that it's important to break down those silos and foster a collaborative culture. I know it's often said in corporate boardrooms, but it really needs to be done here. That's the best way to make sure the engineering process is really optimized for the organization's success. Of course, he also thinks that it's important to keep improving and adapting to changes in the market and changes in technology. What this means is you can't just sit back after the initial process improvement work is done. Finally, Will talks about how important leadership is to make sure everything is aligned with the organization's broader goals and values. The article ties in a few critical concepts around the engineering process. The fact that it's about bringing together ownership, transparency, collaboration, continuous improvement, and effective leadership. Now on to the third article by Shaughnessy, Infrastructure as Code is not the answer. I'm going to put a reader discretion out right now. This article is super controversial on its take on infrastructure as code, and it's put a few people up in arms from what I've seen, especially on Medium, where the comment section is a bit of a bloodbath. What I got from this article is that you look at infrastructure as code with a cautious eye. I'll refer to infrastructure as code from now on as IAC because because saying all of that all the time, infrastructure as code, gets a bit tiring. So sure, IAC can be super helpful, and for a lot of situations, it's essential. In fact, I'd go as far as saying there's no cost-effective, scalable alternative to it. But, and this is what the article aims to highlight with an extreme title, it is important to keep in mind the potential downsides of IAC as well. The author argues that while IAC might be the best choice in some cases, it's not always a guaranteed success. Luke argues that while IAC can make infrastructure management more efficient and consistent, it can also make things more complicated. One of the main concerns brought up in the article is that IAC can become too rigid and inflexible. This can be a real issue for organizations that need to be agile and flexible with their infrastructure. Plus, the author thinks that the cost of IAC doesn't end with the initial setup project. It requires ongoing investment in tools and training. So what does this mean? This means you have to have a consistent IAC capability and continuously improve the people who are assigned to it so that they can use the latest tools for your flavor of IAC. Like I mentioned earlier, there are still plenty of benefits to IAC. For example, it can cut down on errors and inconsistencies in infrastructure management. This saves a lot of time and resources in the long run. Plus, IAC can help to improve collaboration and communication between development and operations teams. That is so important. The end effect is more efficient and effective infrastructure management. So to sum it up, IAC can be a really powerful tool for infrastructure management, but it's important to think about the pros and cons before deciding whether it's the right fit for your organization or situation. Luke didn't really give any solutions to prevent the issues he covered in his article, which I will aim to cover in a LinkedIn post sometime in the future. So don't forget to follow me on LinkedIn. The fourth and final article I'm going to review is Jason Blomberg's How to Engineer Your Technical Debt Response. Jason gives a strong start to his rationale for technical debt by mentioning the Southwest flight cancellation that plagued US flyers in December 2022. It turns out that their systems meltdown was because of unintended technical debt. Who would have thought? Today's fast pace of technology movements means it's essential that businesses continually innovate their products or services. But of course, this means organizations begin to accumulate technical debt. This can be defined as the cost of additional work that arises when a short-term solution is used, instead of a more sustainable, long-term solution. To manage technical debt, some experts recommend treating it as a risk and allocating a threat budget to it. This approach is similar to how we handle reliability-related risks, which is analogous to error budgets from the SRE space. Now, don't jump into doing error budgets if you're hearing about it for the first time or you've kind of heard about it, because error budgets, in my opinion, are an intermediate to advanced SRE practice. Handling the threat budget involves a few things. It involves identifying and prioritizing technical debt items that are most critical to the business, estimating the cost of addressing them, and finally, determining how much of the threat budget to allocate to each item. One advantage of this approach is that it helps organizations make more informed decisions about technical debt rather than simply accumulating it without a clear plan for addressing it. If organizations manage their technical debt in a smart and proactive way like this, they can keep on innovating and making their products or services better without getting bogged down by technical debt in the long term. That's it for this first episode of SRE Review. I've covered 4 articles, all of which I will list the links of in the show notes as well as on the SRE Path website, where I will share the episode description. I'm considering doing this once a month, but if there's a bit of traction on it, I'll do it once every 2 weeks. So let me know your thoughts.